Looks like we're up and going here. Good evening and welcome to politicsincolor.com. Join the conversation. I'm Jonathan Clark, joined by Neil Foote. We've got a host of guests and other experts and members of our team on their way in momentarily on this, the inauguration day for the 47th, once 45th, President of the United States, Donald Trump. Good evening, Neil.
Good evening, and how are you, Jonathan? Great to see you.
I'm doing about as well as can be expected. We are, I don't know if you've ever, I don't know if you're a roller coaster kind of guy when you go to the amusement park. I'm not really that guy, but I've gone on that ride every now and then, and this feels like we've been waiting in line, and now it's our turn to board, and who knows what this ride is about to be like.
You know it. We've got an exciting evening of conversation after an exhausting day of activities. And looks like we've got some guests we've got some exciting guests that are going to help unpack the day for us. Yeah, so what I'd like to do is let me tee up a little bit for those of you new to Politics in Color. Let me share a quick little video to give you a sense of what we've done the past year, and it's been a busy one for Politics in Color. Jonathan Clark and the PIC team were out at the RNC in Milwaukee, and a whole host of others also came to Chicago, and I had a great chance to be a part of that team there. So let's tee up to what we have, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Very good. Well, it looks like that is taking a moment to get here. It will be here shortly. In the meantime, again, we're here at Politics in Color. Join the conversation to recap the day's events so far on this, the inauguration day for now 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump. He began the day by, after he was sworn in his first few words, he declared that the golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will be respected all over the world. He called this Liberation Day, Neil.
He sure did. And that was a scary comment, particularly for a viral video that also went of Mr. Elon Musk with a very bizarre extension of the arm. The
Heil Hitler gesture.
Yes, indeed. That was something.
And he did it a couple times, actually. It wasn't as if it was some sort of mistaken thing. I mean, you know, this is, and I hate to repeat cliches, but this is when people tell you who they are all over again, and not even trying to hide that. How are we coming with that video clip?
Yeah, let's keep moving. We've got a couple of folks. Give me a second. Keep on talking, Jonathan, and I'm going to queue up something else while you're doing that. So,
well, we've got a great lineup here ahead of us today for the for this next hour here. We've got we're going to be joined by Dr. Linwood Tauheed. He's the associate professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He's also the former president of the National Economics Association. Dr. Shantella Sherman, she's a historian, journalist, and the author of In Search of Purity, Eugenics and Racial Uplift Among New Negroes, from 1915 to 1935. Also joining us is John Jeter. He's a former foreign correspondent for the Washington Post. His new book is entitled Class War in America, How Elites Divide the Nation by Asking, Are you a worker or are you white? And Dr. Jim Kavanaugh is going to be joining us as well, an independent journalist whose work can be found at Substack, and also Tom Porter. who is a lifelong activist and scholar, and a former dean of the African American Studies Department at Ohio University, and former director of the King Center in Atlanta, and former host of Morning Conversations with Tom Porter on WPFW in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to toss it over to our very own Dr. Wilmer Leon, who's going to pick up the show with you and Jonathan. We've got a great show, Wilmer. You've had a busy day. Looking forward to the conversation. Take it away.
Yeah, well, a busy day that's been full of change, and we started this journey back in July as we went to Wisconsin, and we told everyone, all of our viewers, and thanks to all of you all for staying with us through these tumultuous days. We started in Wisconsin. We went to Chicago, and with the whole objective of coming to today and the inauguration. And the one thing of all the things that we confronted and all of the challenges that we were able to overcome, the one thing we were not able to overcome is the weather. And so right now in Washington, it's about 17 degrees outside. I think today it didn't get above 22. So that forced the Trump inaugural team to move the inauguration inside. They canceled the parade. Everything became condensed. And as everything became condensed, then it became even more difficult for us to get access. And of course, with a parade that didn't happen, we weren't going to be able to cover things that didn't happen. Where I was today, though, was with Reverend Sharpton at the Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. for the Dr. King celebration and a anti-Trump rally, which was incredibly well attended. And the message from Reverend Sharpton was very, very clear. We're not afraid. We're moving forward. We are accepting the challenge. And he announced that he's working on a boycott plan. He talked about Dr. King. One of Dr. King's fundamental elements being economics, and that as we now find ourselves confronted with companies that have decided that diversity, equity, and inclusion is no longer of interest to them, then Reverend Sharpton will tell you that then our doing business with them is no longer of interest to us. So he's going to announce in 90 days what seems to be a very well thought through and developed plan in terms of he's going to let us know who are the companies that have gone down this road, who are the small businesses that can benefit from our dollars, and there's going to be an economic agenda there. So today in fact, even there was supposed to be a march with Reverend Sharpton up to Metropolitan. That was canceled because of the weather. So for those of you that are wondering why we aren't providing you any coverage of the inauguration, it's because most of the things that we were planning to cover were canceled.
Weather always wins. It always factors in, and in football and everything else. So, although in football they play the game regardless.
Exactly.
Well, you've got some really great guests who are lined up. Tell us a little bit about who we're going to hear from.
Well, we will be hearing from, I think in this first segment, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, who is an independent journalist. He writes for the polemicist.net and a number of other sources. Jim's been an independent journalist for a number of years. Really interesting analysis, fact-based analysis, an incredible writer. And he spent over the last couple of weeks writing an awful lot about the situation in Gaza. We're also, as we're now being joined by Tom Porter, former chair of the Black Studies Department at Ohio University, former director of the King Center. He's been a lifelong activist. He was in SNCC. He was in CORE. This brother right here knows the landscape. And my radio show is listening to Tom Porter. I started listening to him in 1981, and his analysis changed my worldview. We've got here Dr. Chantella Sherman, who is a historian, a researcher, and an expert on eugenics. And I think if you paid any attention to Donald Trump's inaugural speech today, Dr. Sherman, I'm sure you heard a lot of eugenic theories and constructs, and of course, the former writer with the Washington Post, and another scholar, phenomenal writer, John Jeter. The table is set, folks. The table is set.
Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we probably want to get started here just with a quick word from each of you on what this moment means now. We've all had the top level conversations at one point or another about how this is the first time we've had a convicted felon in office. So I suppose that's the baseline. But beyond that, what does this moment mean right now to have Donald Trump return in all of his glory to the White House, knowing all that we know about him? And let's start off with Tom Porter. Tom?
Well, to me, it's just a continuation of the con. I mean, Trump is a Murphy man. Murphy is, you know what a Murphy man? A Murphy man is a pimp that has no prostitutes. He sells the illusion to the John. And so this is just a continuation of the illusion. I think that we shouldn't be afraid. We should be ready, but we shouldn't be afraid. I'm not afraid. I mean, we've been here before. He's the first convicted felon, but he's not the first felon. In fact, we'd be hard put not to find one who wasn't a felon if we really look deeper.
In fact, just quickly, Tom, you said he's a Murphy man. When I listened to him today, the first thing that came to my mind was prestidigitation. Look at your right hand while I take your wallet with my left. Interesting that you would come up with that.
He actually believes in the art of the deal, that everything is a deal. He actually believes that. And so I didn't hear anything new from him, just an articulation of his normal positions.
Dr. Sherman, did you hear Murphy man as well as you listened to Trump today?
Oh, absolutely. I can echo Dr. Porter's sentiments. I did hear quite a bit of eugenic wrangling, and that wasn't necessarily frightening to me, but it raised the anxiety levels, I think, of a lot of people in the nation, because this is the type of language that we heard outright 100 years ago. And so what he's doing at this point is pulling from historical notes, fears and anxieties of white America at this point. And so we just need to pay attention and act accordingly.
I'm hearing from you, and I've also heard just now from Tom Porter, this sense that, yeah, we ought to be a little bit anxious right now, but we don't need to be here on fire just yet. And so I'm wondering, John Jeter, as you join the conversation here, how do we manage to be both anxious but not afraid?
Well, first of all, I want to pay homage to Tom Porter for invoking the image of President Trump as Iceberg Slim. I will never, ever get over that. Well, I think the answer to your question, though, if I can be maybe a little bit corny, is, the slaves used to say, we were born to die. And maybe this is the moment where we realize that more than ever, right? We were born to fight. We were born to die. This is an inflection point. Donald Trump, I think it would be a mistake to overestimate his power and the singularity or uniqueness of his vision, which is indeed loathsome, but he's not the first. He's not the beginning of our problem. But also, I think, to contextualize him in historical space, right? He is summoning, all of the Southern Democrats, in Wilmington, North Carolina, in 1898, and Atlanta in 1906 by he's trying to stoke these sectarian tensions, mostly racial, and he's doing that in an effort to distract the American voters away from what the real problem is. The real problem is this corporate state, which is taking control of democracy in the United States. And he's trying to, as the czars did this in pre-revolutionary Russia, they would pit the ethnic, there were like 100 different ethnic groups in pre-revolution, I guess there still are, in Russia. And he would try to pit, the czars would try to pit them against one another so that people wouldn't notice that they were the ones that were stealing all the money. That's what Trump is. So there's nothing new to him. And while I think our future is not in our past, we can learn a lot from how we the people fought against this creeping fascism in the 1930s with the onset of the Great Depression, how we came together, how we organized differently, how we thought differently, how we saw each other differently, not as different tribes, but as co-workers.
I'm getting the sense from you all that while we're watching this right hand, it's that left hand that we need to be concerned with. Wilmer, bring yourself back on in here and give us your take, the broad sense of this inflection moment that John Jeter just shared with us. In what way is it that for you, and what do you think is on tap, particularly as we give some eye to the next 100 days, which Trump has promised will be a whirlwind for us?
Well, I've been saying for a while that there are moments, there are epochs, there are events that change history. And usually when that moment occurs, you don't realize it was that moment until you reflect upon it later. I'm calling these moments now Oppenheimer moments. And I use Oppenheimer because when the gadget, which was the first atomic bomb that was exploded in 1940, I think in July of 1945, Oppenheimer, upon witnessing that blast, said, he quoted the Hindu scripture. He said, I am become death. I am now the destroyer of worlds. He knew in that moment that he was in the moment. And we are now in the position of transitioning from the unipolar construct to a multipolar construct. The empire is dying. Some will say it is already dead. And as John likes to say, the last kicks of a dying mule can be the most dangerous. So to Tom's point, and to Dr. Sherman's point, this isn't new for us. But what I do see that is different is there's a shift in the binary party structure. The old Republican Party is done. Donald Trump has consumed the Frankenstein monster that they created with the Tea Party and Tom Tancredo and we want our country back and all of that garbage. That Frankenstein monster has now consumed the village. Mitch McConnell is done. Lindsey Graham is done. And the only reason why Lil Marco isn't done is because he jumped ship before the last wave capsized the whole damn thing. But on the Democrat side, that's done as well, because thanks to Bill Clinton and the Democratic Leadership Council, they moved the Democratic Party right. So the whole binary Democratic Republican structure has now changed, I believe, irrevocably and forever.
So it sounds then like the structural integrity of the system that we once knew, to use your word, is dead. And we've seen how, when that's occurred in the past, Donald Trump has had the capacity to exploit gaps like that. So that takes me back to where we started. Some anxiousness, some scariness, not to be entirely afraid yet, but what should we be afraid of? Who wants to take that? Who wants to? What is your big concern? what's the one thing that could happen that wouldn't surprise you one bit, but is awfully darn scary? Dr. Sherman?
If I had to gander, I'm not particularly afraid of it, but I believe that it's possible. When you back people against walls and you tell them that they should be afraid, Donald Trump spoke constantly about fear. And he wasn't talking about us being afraid. He was talking about other folks being afraid. And as a person who studies eugenics, there was always this fear that at some point, those on the bottom would rise up and take over the nation. It was the rising tide of color. In addition to that, there's a rising tide of just confusion. He talks about the binary, but from here on out, there will only be two genders. And it's the fear, the illegal aliens that are coming over that he's calling violent, that he's saying belong in mental health institutions or in prisons. He called them everything but feeble-minded. And when I heard that, it was literally, oh, these are old school eugenic terms that we've gone away from, but he's speaking them out loud. And he's speaking them out loud because, once again, we're talking about global birth rates and white men no longer being in charge. One of the things that I noted with this inauguration, when I looked into that room of folks coming in, it was a whole group of aged, white-haired men. And that in and of itself told you something about the structure of this nation. The things that work, if you're an 80, 90-year-old person, the things that worked when you got into office aren't going to work now. They're not going to work. All right. You can't tell people you're going to open up manufacturing spaces and we're going to build cars and we're going to dig. You can't do that anymore. Do you not know where we are in the world? But when you massage and give a balm to people who are fearful and afraid, and then they realize that they are no longer in charge mentally, then they start acting out violently. So my biggest concern, if I had one, would not be anything that's legislative. It would be the mindset of the people who he's talking to. So you start to have random acts of violence. You start having Tulsa all over again. You start having racial uprisings that are white people who are basically white mob violence, folks who are unhappy and they can't quite figure out why they're feeling duress, why all of a sudden they're stressed out, while their health isn't the way it is, while they're not making money. And the only thing and the only people they can think to blame for this is either your president or the people who don't look like you who are around you. And so I think that would be my only concern is that violence, because the rest of this has been here and it's been here all along, but it's just been a slow rumbling, if anything.
The thing that I did not hear you say, Dr. Sherman, and that I want to kick over to John here, is I did not necessarily hear you say that any of this is new Trump. This sounds very old Trump. This is the Trump that we've been accustomed to since 2016, since he hit the stage in 2016. We're not talking about, oh wow, what's this new entity? This is the Donald Trump we've known before. I've always said Donald Trump doesn't frighten me. It's the people who follow Donald Trump who frighten me, who will still be here after his second term ends, and assuming he doesn't pull a third out of a rabbit's hat somewhere. So then, John, in what way are you concerned about Trump 2.0, who looks and sounds a lot like Trump 1.0?
Well, first of all, Dr. Sherman said everything I would have said to start off. I think that is the fears that we are likely to have. We're already seeing some violence. I think if we did some real research, of course, they don't really compile these statistics, but I think if we did some real research, we would find that this is probably, at least over the last 10 years, has been the greatest outbreak of racial violence since 1919, easily, I would think, since the Red Summer of 1919. That's my guess anyway. But to your point, it's not to me so much about old Trump and new Trump, although I try purposely deliberately to ignore him. But when I do hear him speak, I hear this messianic quality to his rhetoric that he has clearly ratcheted up, which is not so much scary, but it's alarming because unlike 2016 or 2017, in 2025, the material conditions on the ground are much worse for everyone. And this is not predicting that we're going to see, what happened in Germany in the 1930s, but the conditions on the ground and then a demagogue in the highest office in the land, those are two very similar things, right? Those are two very similar conditions where we have a demagogue and we have people who are very desperate. We have a financial crisis most people aren't even aware of. I mean, in the New York Times today, in response to Trump's inaugural address, they wrote that he was off base because the economy is doing great, which is ridiculous, right? They don't even understand that we have a debt crisis unlike anything any country in the world has ever seen. So I guess to add on to what Dr. Sherman said, I do fear that there's very likely a surge, an escalation in violence, particularly racial violence by desperate whites, most of them ignorant, meaning they don't know what they don't know, which is by design. If you look at the news and entertainment media, and also, the academy is not very strong. So there could very likely be an escalation in violence. There are reasons to believe that what happened in Germany in the 1930s could reoccur here in some way or form. I don't know exactly how that is. And I think that the threat of violence is very real. This is the United States, right? We were founded on slavery, rape, and genocide, right? And we've just seen a genocide in Gaza. I think that we might actually go deeper into down that spider hole.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm really curious about, and I really want to pick this up with Tom and run with this, is this notion of early to mid-century Germany, and the threat of that happening here, because certainly that's what the opposition to Trump put on the table. That's how they set the table for the election. It was here comes a tyrant, and be afraid. This is Hitler all over again. That was pre-sitting and yucking it up with him at the funeral. But now you're telling me that that is based in some reality. Tom, are we looking at Hitler redux? Are we looking at Germany redux?
Well, the seeds of fascism have always been present within the American political order. I mean, slavery was genocide and fascism. So the seeds have always been there. And I'm old enough, I'm 85 years old. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm old enough to remember that German sympathizers marched in the streets of Cincinnati as a kid. So those seeds have always been here. The seeds were there for the Goldwater convention, the election, and coming all the way up through. It's interesting that Wilma mentioned Mary Shelley's Frankenstein monster. Frankenstein was a doctor who created a monster out of dead parts. And some of my Marxist friends said that was symbolic of dead labor aggressing on live labor. So the seeds of fascism, what gives me hope is that there's an awakening among Black folks, which I didn't see. In fact, I think if Kamala Harris had gotten elected, we would have gone back to sleep and waited for the next 4 years to say that we got to vote for the less of two evils. And we'd go through 4 years like we did with Obama, lying, dancing, and eating barbecue in the White House. So the seeds of fascism have always been there. I'm fearful, if I'm fearful about anything, is the violence that you spoke about. But there's another kind of violence that's potentially on the horizon, which is what you see is a split between Steve Bannon, who wants to build a white nationalist fascist movement, and Elon Musk and all those other people. They're concerned about money, including Trump. And so that split is already happening. And whereas I think there will be some random acts of violence, I'm optimistic that I think that there are enough Black people who are fearful about that and are also preparing themselves to deal with it. And I don't think it's going to be as easy as they think. at the same time, he can't deliver. You're right about the economy. But when they talk about the economy, they always talk about growth. They never talk about development. You can have the economy can grow, and the people on the bottom will keep sliding towards the bottom unless you talk about development. And I'm hoping and optimistic that there are going to be enough of labor leaders who will begin to sound the alarm, and that many of these MAGA Republicans, when they go in the Safeway of Whole Foods, wherever they go, and say, look, I don't like Black folks, I don't like Mexicans, blah, 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 I want a discount. And they're not going to get a discount. And,
no discount coming, no.
And so that's the reason why I say the seeds of fascism have always been here. They were here with Goldwater. They were here with the Bushes. And they were here, the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party did not take a stand against what's happening in Gaza. They did not take a stand. Not even Kamala Harris.
Well, I would argue, Tom, that they did take a stand, and it was the wrong one.
You're right. Thanks for correcting me.
And let me add quickly to something that both Tom, John, and Chantella said as we're bringing on Dr. Jim Kavanaugh and Dr. Linwood Tawhid, and that is the white mob, the fear of the white mob violence is real because, as Tom said, Trump's not going to be able to deliver. That's the first point. The second point, well, he will deliver on the tax cut, but you're going to have to look at who's going to be catching hell to fund that tax cut. And a lot of those poor and middle class white people are going to find they were sold a pig and a poke. And because the economy right now isn't nearly as strong and growing and glowing. I heard today on NPR they were saying, "Oh, the American economy is the envy of the world." Well, if you grew at 2.3% and China grew at almost 6%, we need Dr. Tawhid on here to help me do that math. But so these folks are going to, and the final point is, one of the things that Donald Trump, I think his executive order is to freeze federal hiring. People need to understand where the federal government is. It's in all of these states. And in a lot of these states, these are white people that are going to lose their jobs. And a lot of these folks, a lot of these white folks that are federal employees that voted for Trump are going to lose their jobs. And are you going to be able to blame the Mexicans for that?
Right.
I think not.
Thank you, Wilmer, and thank you, Tom, for joining us. I know that you need to leave us now, so I want to thank you for joining the conversation and joining us here on politicsincolor.com for our inauguration coverage here. Tom Porter is a lifelong activist and a scholar. He's a former dean of the African American Studies Department at Ohio University and a former director of the King Center in Atlanta and former host of Morning Conversations with Tom Porter on WPFW in Washington, D.C. Tom, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Looking across the panel right now, I see that we're also joined now by Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, glad to have you here. Jim, of course, is an independent journalist whose work can be found at Substack and the Polemicist. Jim, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Jim is also joined by Dr. Linwood Tawhid. Dr. Tawhid here is an associate professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and former president of the National Economics Association. Dr. Tawhid, thank you for being here right now.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Tawhid, what's the economic message here coming out of this inauguration and now jumping into this first 100 days?
Well, I think the grand message is that Trump has promised much, much more than he will be able to deliver. But it's consistent with the theme that he has run on and as at first term and now as second term president. Wilmer raised some concepts that I think are important here. One is that we are in an epic changing in the change of history. Now, epic is not a short time frame. This has been going on for a while, but it's been running to a point where, as Antonio Gramsci said, the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to come into existence. He also cautions us by saying this is the time of monsters, and so we have that. We have an empire that is dying both economically and militarily and socially. I mean, in pretty much every category, there is a new empire replacing an old empire. It seems to me that the new empire is a multinational empire, if you will. It's not just China. It is. I think BRICS is significant in terms of how it's coming into being as a part of the multipolar world. We can talk about that more, but I think there's certainly this dying of an empire. Wilmer also said something else. He mentioned in a context that I had never thought about before the idea of the uni party, the Democrats and Republican being the same party. Now you remember, well, you don't remember, but historically you will remember that Lincoln was that in Lincoln's time before that election, we had the Democratic Republican Party. It was one party. The Whigs was the opposition party, and it died. It went away. Then the Democrats and the Republicans split, and they have come back together, which opens up an opportunity for a different party, which means that one of those, either the Democratic Republican Party, the new Democratic Republican Party, has to disappear, or it continues on. But continuing on in a context of the international context, I don't think it's going to be possible, because there is a larger political economy that's growing, and that has resources and ambitions and intentions, I think, that are much greater than the U.S. can bring to bear. A question that I ask, and I certainly the panelists here ask, is what is the position of the African American community as this process is unfolding? How do we deal with this? And I'm not quite sure that we know how to do that yet as a people. I'm not even sure that we are, as a people, confronting the fact that there is a changing of there's a dying of the empire, and the new world is struggling to come into existence.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that momentarily. Would like to hear a word from Jim here momentarily, but would like to come back, particularly when you talk about BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America.
South Africa.
South Africa, yeah. When you talk about those nations, which from a leadership position right now, as Trump re-enters the White House, one might argue that it's BRICS, that the United States fits into that mold in some way from a leadership paradigm now. As he's cozier and friendlier with the leaders of those countries. Well, there's Lula in Brazil now as compared with Bolsonaro, but he's fitting a mold that you would customarily find in nations such as that. Jim, what was your message to your Substack today?
Well, I didn't write anything on Substack today. I was watching, unfortunately, I spent a lot of time watching this political theater, which was pretty good political theater, and enjoying the fact that it was the first day of the new golden age of America. But I want to second the point that what it seems to me what Trump is. He's an old style, I'm a New Yorker. My oldest brother was Donald Trump without money. And, he's got a certain style to him that appeals to people as charming. He's one, he talks directly. He's saying it like it is. That's what people feel when they hear him. Okay. But you have this problem in the United States, and we have to recognize something. Donald Trump has garnered a larger and larger segment of non-white voters since 2016. He won the Mexican American communities on the southern border. He won them. Okay. And what you have here, the problem in the United States now, I would say twofold, is that the social economy, as opposed to the number GDP economy, the social economy is terrible. People can't afford the rent. People can't afford the groceries. People are getting on social media and saying, I have a good job. My husband and I make $80,000 a year and we still can't live. Okay. This is the problem that Donald Trump, that's why people have moved away from the Democratic Party, because they failed. They failed since 2008. Barack Obama had a chance to change the political, the social economy of the country, and he deliberately didn't. He went to the bankers and he said, I'm the one standing between you and the pitchforks. And that was his policy, to revive the bankers and to let the people with the pitchforks lose their homes. Okay. And that's why Trump came in 2016. And that's why people have been, because what the policies of the Democratic Party have not solved that at all and have made it worse. Okay. And Trump is proposing, that's what Michael Moore said in 2016. People are voting, all the working class are going to vote for Donald Trump because he's a big FU to the establishment, because they're tired of the establishment telling them they have to wait for this and wait for that and do things this way. And Donald Trump presents himself as a big screw you to the establishment. And the establishment has spent, I couldn't believe it. I said this a million times on Wilmer's show. They spent 8 years showing everybody how afraid they were of him. Instead of letting him get up and talk and give his message, whatever it be, he became the victim of lawfare and a political persecution. And that worked in his favor, ultimately. So at the end of the day, he's got to solve these problems. The problem of the working class, the multiracial, multinational working class, whose lives are getting worse. And they feel like no matter how hard I work, I can't get ahead. And he's saying he's going to do that. With whom? With Elon Musk and all the billionaires. He's running, he's filling his, so he's going to have to show some. Now, he does say certain things. Look, I'm astounded at what he did with the International Longshoremen's Association. They came into Donald Trump's office and said there was a two-stage strike. There was a first strike, they had a contract, and there was another issue that there was unresolved, which was automation coming in. And that's a big one for the companies and a big one for the union. And there was going to be another strike in January. And the ILA leaders, that's why Trump was talking about them today, came into his office and said, we want you to do something for us. And Donald Trump picked up the phone and talked to the head of the shipping companies and said, give it to him on the automation. And they did. And Donald Trump helped the ILA win that strike. I'm astounded that Donald Trump went to Israel and told Netanyahu, we need a ceasefire, we're going to have it now. I'm astounded at that. And a lot of people in the country are astounded at it too. I don't think that's going to last. I think this is phony. Look, it worked politically for him, and he knows what's in his political interest. And that's what one of the things that the establishment doesn't like about him, that we have to acknowledge, that we find out, oh my gosh, we don't know what he's going to do. He's completely, inconsistent and unpredictable. And he may do something that, my favorite description of Donald Trump is from Keaton Weiss, who says he's like playing Russian roulette with a gun with 5 bullets in it. So sometimes something goes
like Hugo Chavez said about George Bush, he's as dangerous as a monkey with a razor blade.
Yeah. So Trump has set for himself. People of color have moved away from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. Donald Trump, the Republican Party, won voters under $100,000. The Democratic Party won voters over $100,000. That's an important class realignment. Okay, and Donald Trump and his Republican Party now have that problem they have to solve, and I don't think he's going to be able to solve it. He, like the Democrats, are going to. He's got his billionaires. most of whom were the Democratic billionaires 4 years ago. I mean, Elon Musk voted for Biden, and now he's a Trump boy. And the other problem, of course, is people don't want to spend all this money on foreign wars. What are we doing in Ukraine? Why are we sending $100 billion to Israel and $150 billion to Ukraine? What is this all about? And he's claiming he's going to do something about that. Oh, well, he pulled a ceasefire in Gaza. Let's see what happens. I think it's a cruel hoax that's going to go away, and he's going to be uber Zionist like the rest of them. And I don't think he has any idea what to do about Ukraine, because I think he thinks he can intimidate the world. America first for him is not just Americans have to think is America first, but that every other country in the world has to think America first. And he thinks he can pull that off, and he thinks he can intimidate the economy in some way. He can, tough talk his way into changing the social economy for people and creating new manufacturing. That's a big task. He's going to run into problems with it. So I think, he's got the problem of his success. It's the problem of the success of the fact that the working class is disgusted with the Democratic Party, black and white. And they feel that the Democratic Party has not done what they should and will not do it. And they don't believe a word they say because they shouldn't. They were lied to for at least 4 years by every Democratic politician and media person who knew that Joe Biden was non-compos mentis and lied about it. And that's just one thing. But so now they think Donald Trump is going to help him because he's a tough guy and he gets up and he says it. And that we're going to see the next 100 days, 6 months, 1 year. He's doing things that are going to get him a political headwind for 6 months, I think. And then we're going to see what happens. People's lives have to change. You have to be able to afford the rent. You have to be able to afford food. You have to be able to afford health care. And you can't sit around and be losing all of that stuff and watching $100 billion going to Ukraine and Israel. That is the devastation. And he says he's going to solve that. I don't believe it for a second, but we got to understand why a lot of people want to believe it, because they certainly don't believe the Democrats are going to do it.
Who would have ever thought that Jimmy, the rent is too damn high, McMillan was a guy ahead of his time? According to Jim Kavanaugh, Dr. Sherman, on the eugenics note, Donald Trump wants to do away with birthright citizenship, which is a constitutional guarantee. He's today or tomorrow, when the sun comes up tomorrow, we were told we were going to see the largest mass arrest of illegal aliens and deportation. Now they've backed away from that. But again, just the blatant inherent racism in this man is mind-boggling to me.
It's fantasy driven and it's fear driven. And so again, I think that if you listen to the language of America is being taken advantage of by whom? So it's not an external issue that he's talking about, but it's people who have forced their way in, and also the people who are here who are quote unquote weak. What happened to the person who could fight it out? What happened to that John Wayne spirit? So you have to understand that what you're saying is genetically, we've weakened to a point where we've allowed the worst of us to take over the nation. That is the liturgy that he's giving you. That is the liturgy that's what you're hearing. And so this is the reason why it's about a particular type of American that makes the citizen, that makes the patriot, but you have to get rid of all these people who are making you feel unsafe and unwhole, and compromising the country and the nation with all of these schemes that he's talking about. And are you really a citizen? And so we're going to start talking about, we're going to be colorblind is what he said. And everything is going to be based on merit. So are we about to go back to starter and determine IQ tests to determine who is considered to be inept and socially capable of being an American? Is that what we're doing? Also understand it's not just about Mexicans. It's also about Chinese. It's also about Asians. So that border isn't just coming up from the South is also coming up from the North in Canada. That's why Canada was getting its threats. These are old school. Like I said, this sounds like 1925 as opposed to 2025. You're talking about
actually, in some regards, it sounds like 1725 when they talk about the wall, building the wall along the southern border, because Wall Street in New York, that wall was built in like the 1700s to protect the colonists against the Native Americans. So
just also understand this. If you're telling people you're going to start manufacturing again, you're going to have people in orchards picking fruit, but you're going to keep the Mexicans from coming up. What white person do you know who's going to work in a field or a farm or in a plant for a wage that won't sustain him or her or their family? So what are you actually saying? And so again, I don't think he's thought this out. He's using an old rule book. And everything is modernized. People are in cars that are driving you. You don't have to drive the car anymore. So what is it that he's talking about aside from feeding fantasy and feeding fear right now? And so we have to be very, very cautious about this because folks are buying in.
Before we go to Dr. Tauheed with that question, I want to quickly, you use the word liturgy, and that I think is incredibly telling because, John, you have these Christian evangelicals that are proclaiming that Donald Trump is the trumpet of God, and Donald Trump has said, oh, my life was spared, therefore I've been born again, and God has sent me here to do this. You have these evangelicals that are saying that Donald Trump has been anointed by God to do this. That's a whole nother level of marketing and playing it. John Jeter.
No, I agree. I was struck by Dr. Sherman's use of the word liturgy too. As you know, Wilmer, you've read my book. I compare white supremacy, particularly in its historic uses, to a religion, right? The association of black with death and white with life, and so you see these lynchings, right? You look at the remember the look on Derek Chauvin's face when he was strangling George Floyd. It was a joyful look, almost, if I can use this word, almost libidinal. It looked like, right? If I can sort of use that term, which Dr. Frank Wilderson has kind of popularized. But there is a religious component to what I think is a class war, but it's being prosecuted as a race war. And there are some religious elements within that. I don't think there's any doubt. And Trump, I don't know if it's conscious or not. He's not a particularly intelligent man, but he has clearly ratcheted up this religious language. What did he say? I am your retribution. I mean, that is very compelling language to. And I'm not trying to be insulting here, but I'm just saying America is a very anti-intellectual place. But to particularly whites who believe in white supremacy more than they believe in God, that is a particularly potent rhetoric to use. So yeah, I agree completely with Dr. Sherman. There's a religious aspect of this, a liturgy, a catechism, right, that is built on white life and black death, and so killing us in some ways is how they know that they're alive, is through our death. I don't think this is anything thought out, but I think I would love to talk to Dr. Sherman more about her ideas on what do we call it? Eugenics, right? But I think part of that eugenics is this religious fervor that's kind of handed down from generation to generation. And as the economy goes south, I think it strengthens.
And Dr. Tauheed, you mentioned coming in that Donald Trump he's not going to be able to get this done.
Right.
And when the continuing resolution was agreed to in December, Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries shook hands, and Mike Johnson shook hands with the fiscal hawks in his party, saying we're going to kick the discussion of cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and food stamps and veterans benefits down to March. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that, and I believe the Democrats are going to be complicit in these cuts. There's going to be some negotiation, and Hakeem Jeffries is going to run around like Barney Fife when he can't find his bullet.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I know I'm showing my age. At the end of the day, they're going to capitulate, and instead of them cutting it 60%, they'll cut it 40%, and the Democrats will say, "Look at what we did for you.
Mhm.
We saved you 20%." Dr. Tauheed.
The attack on the New Deal started in 1934 when the New Deal was passed. There was an attack by Republicans on the New Deal. That attack on the New Deal programs, particularly Social Security, was joined by the Democrats in the administration of Bill Clinton. It was obvious that now the country is running out of money, at least from their point of view, and things had to be cut. Now you can't cut the defense budget because that is the sacred cow. So you have to cut social programs, and so you cut Social Security, you cut Medicare. You probably start with Medicaid because that's a program for the poor, and the poor have much less power. But then you move on to Medicare and Social Security, which is, of course, a program that is mostly for elders, and elders have the highest level of voting in the country. So that makes it very difficult to do that unless you can convince them that we have no money. And so yes, that's an agenda that's been going on for almost 100 years, and perhaps Trump is the one to under his administration to bring that forward, since we are in such dire fiscal situation. I think there's also another area that Trump will not be able to be successful. I mean, he's promised tariffs, and he's going to tariff every country, Canada, Mexico, China, so forth. There's just tariffs everywhere.
Even Cleveland. Go put tariffs on Cleveland.
Well,
that's another country. My bad.
Now there is a time, if you're a free marketer, you think tariffs are always bad. But there was a time in the U.S. history when tariffs were actually good. That's the 19th century, when the U.S. was a low-wage country. Britain, was the major economy. It was a high-wage country. And the U.S. put tariffs on British goods, mostly textiles, and then engaged in a process of what we call import substitution industrialization. It began to build industry to be able to produce those textiles that were no longer going to be able to be imported from Britain. And of course, it had the enslaved cotton coming from the South instead of going to Britain to create that product. So it had its resources, and it had lots of labor. That was the 19th century. That is not the 21st century. For the U.S. to believe that it can put a tariff on Chinese T-shirts, and then begin to manufacture T-shirts in the U.S. means a T-shirt that will cost you $10 from China is going to cost you $50 in the U.S. That's not going to happen. In addition, U.S. labor no longer knows how to manufacture anything, right? And so that process of having tariffs without having an industrial policy is not going to work. It's not going to happen. And then Elon Musk, his compatriot, is also arguing that, well, we really can't educate these Americans to a point of being able to be industrialized because they're too dumb, they're too stupid, and so we have to import labor from elsewhere in order to do any of these things, particularly the tech things that Musk is interested in. And so there is no room in that process for American labor, and particularly no room in that process for Black American labor. There's no consideration that the Black community is going to benefit from these tariffs. But the tariffs are not, this is not the 19th century, this is the 21st century, and it's not going to work.
I'm going to ask everyone, we were planning to get out of here at 9 o'clock. We're going so well here. Can everybody stick around for another half hour? Can y'all give me another 30, give us all another 30 minutes or so just to continue this conversation, which is really going in a great direction. Dr. Tawhid, there's another thing I think that's coming over the horizon here as well, is there are certain rare minerals that China's controlling right now that we basically I ceded to them to satisfy the conservationists here, and now it's seeming like less of a strategic benefit for us to have China controlling that. China itself has been offshoring some of those responsibilities to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
It's seeming now to make some sense to bring some of that mining back here, and that's going to upset some people here. It's going to upset some folks on the left, wouldn't you say?
Well, the possibility of bringing mining back is predicated on the location of the minerals, right? You have rare earth minerals in Russia, and in China you have it in that part of the world. You don't have that large a deposit of these rare earth minerals in the U.S., at least not so far discovered. Now you may be able to dig up every field and nook and cranny in the country to find them, but as so far the deposit of these rare earth minerals that are important in national security are found in China and in Africa and in Russia, and not in the U.S. So that the recognition, when the Chinese began to say that okay, we're going to stop importing rare earth minerals into Europe and into the U.S. if you go along with these tariffs, maybe something that causes the Trump administration to become weaker on these tariffs. And I believe Trump at one point a couple of weeks ago made a statement that between the U.S. and China we can solve the problems of the world. So maybe he's becoming more of a realist in this process. He's getting horrible advice from his economic advisors who are very much stuck in the 19th century, but perhaps him being more transactional, he doesn't know what the 19th century was about anyway, and so maybe he'll take better advice from business people who are involved in this process than he does from his economists.
Earlier today, there was a counter rally at the Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. Reverend Sharpton led the rally, made the call, and basically packed the house. We've got a few minutes of video from the event, so if you all want to run that, just a few clips to give folks a taste of some of the dialogue that was taking place, or maybe some might say diatribe that was taking place. And I say that in no disrespect. Go ahead and roll the video. Well, as we're trying to cue that up, Dr. Kavanaugh, they were talking about rare earth minerals and the difference between the United States and China. One of the things that I think is important in that discussion is the difference between how the United States exploits the minerals in foreign countries versus how China negotiates the rights to those minerals. The United States, in most instances, just goes in and extracts, pays the country for the unrefined mineral, pennies on the dollar. And uranium, for example, in Niger is a perfect example of that. I think Dr. Tawhid has would be able to quote the exact prices being paid. But China goes in and negotiates pricing that is much more market driven, closer to the market value, and doesn't well, I'll just put it that way. Your thoughts on that, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh?
Yes, their relationships, their economic relationships like that are much more what they call win-win relationships. And they're not just exploitative. And they build things. Americans come into the country and they build a military base and bomb other countries. So the Chinese come in, they build a port, they build an airport, and they do it on good terms. It's just not the same thing. I'm going to say this one thing. I caught on to this, I don't know, 6 months ago. You want to know something about what's going on in the world economy? There's a YouTube channel called Inside China Business. It's a businessman who's been in China for many years. And I'm telling you, you watch this and you start to realize they have no idea what's going on here. They have no idea. The wheat, goes on about the wheat market and how used to be all the wheat futures and this be run out of Chicago, the Chicago Board of Trade. No longer. They don't know what's going on. They're going, I know there's a market out there for wheat. There are people buying hundreds of thousands of tons. Where's it coming from? Where's it going to? They don't know because it's all now going through BRICS in China. He talks about how iPhone, every year, the business press in the United States, Apple says, we're going to have to start building iPhones in the United States. And he shows you why that's not going to happen. And I'm telling you, watch this channel, you'll see the real problem that's happened. And the Americans don't realize this yet. They're partying like it's 1999, and it's not. It's not 1999. It's not 1950. It's not 2015. It's beyond that. And the Chinese have developed this because they have a state-directed system of a planned economy. That's what socialism used to be known as, a planned economy. There's capitalist enterprises in China, and there's capitalism, but there's fundamentally a state-directed system, which is able to put capital, state capital, and to from the top down and from the bottom up have, if we're going to build this industry, here's how we're going to do it, and here's the plan that we're going to use, and here's how we're going to build factories and enterprises in this city, and this city, and that city, and everybody's on it. So this is a problem that's not going to be solved by huffing and puffing and trying to blow the house down. And that's, I didn't realize it. And I tell you, very few people realize how difficult it is. China has gotten ahead of us in so many ways. It's hard to believe.
And don't they call their capitalism, Dr. Tauheed, is capitalism with Chinese values or Chinese principles?
Well, it's 57 varieties of capitalism. They have one.
Right.
Capitalism is not just a simple or a single way of doing things. And so what the Chinese, as Dr. Kavanaugh has said, have come across a way of producing and with a distribution of the value of that production more generally out to the population. Okay. And so, for example, since 2000, the Chinese have raised the median household income by 700%. In that same time period, the U.S. median household income has risen by 7%, 100 times, and it's not stopping. It hasn't stopped. China was a low-cost income country. It is now a medium-high income country. It's moving forward, and what the BRICS arrangement allows it to do is to offshore the production out to other countries that are part of BRICS without taking all of the value away from those countries. So, for example, in Niger, which is more a Russian, an anti-French, Russian ally, right? Uranium, which was being sold to the French, was being sold for roughly $1 per kilo, right? It's the French would get that $1 per kilo uranium and sell it on the world market for $200 per kilo, right? And so the Nigerians are getting practically nothing for that resource. That resource allowed France to be the greatest producer, the largest producer of nuclear power in the European continent. Now that the Nigerians have taken control of that uranium, they're able, if they want to, they can sell it on the world market for that $200. But they're also being helped by the Russians to build nuclear power plants in Niger. So they can take the uranium, they can process it, they can then put it into a power plant to create electricity, so that not only Niger will be able to have electricity, but other countries will be able to buy electricity. That's, there's an idea in economics that goes back to David Ricardo. It's called comparative advantage. And when nations sell according to a comparative advantage, they are both supposed to win. There's supposed to be a win-win possibility, but that's only theoretical. If one country is able to extort the other country, then one country wins everything and the other country wins nothing. And so France has been in the U.S., the West in general, has been the winner take all in these arrangements. That's coming to an end, and it's coming to an end because of the relationship that African countries and some South American countries and certainly Central Asian countries are having with Russia and China, which is not, and these countries are not going forward in their relationships to be exploitative. They seem to be, at least right now, generally concerned with development as opposed to what Tom Porter says, just economic growth.
Before we go to the video, John Jeter, Dr. Tauheed was talking about, he was using the textile industry as an example where the tariffs back in the 18th century,
19th century.
19th century, I'm sorry, 1800s, made sense. And one of the things that caught my ear was he said that we put textiles on we put tariffs on British textiles so that the United States could then develop a textile industry. And then after the United States developed the textile industry, what did it do? It offshored the textile industry into Vietnam. So you write a lot about class, and I just wanted to make that point and get your, just throw that to you and let you run with it wherever you wanted to take it, because I know you'll score.
Yeah, well, thank you for having faith in me. I was very interested in what Dr. Tauheed was saying. I know that when I was in South Africa more than 20 years ago now, the biggest problem is, as Dr. Tauheed described it, really is a lack of economic development, particularly as expressed, as articulated through value-added manufacturing, right? So you can they grow coffee in Africa, right? But at least when I was in, I think this is still true, there's not a single coffee roaster in Africa, right? The value added is where you make your money. That's the next step for Africa. I have not seen any numbers yet to say that they are starting to turn the greater income that they're receiving from China into value added, but I expect that to happen. I just say, the Africans, I know we depict them here as savages and backwards people, but they are very, very smart people, and particularly in that Sahel region where you see these very young people. I can't remember his name, the man in Burkina Faso, who is clearly knows about Thomas Sankara. I expect that very soon we're going to start seeing plants, factories in Africa, and Africa will take off once it starts developing its economy, because it's got all the mineral resources and raw resources to actually add to development. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm hoping that we see Africa take off in the next decade. Well,
and to that point, as we're now getting ready to roll the video, there was an article about 3 months ago. I think Jim and we talked about this. They're getting ready to start launching. Russia has entered into an agreement with Burkina Faso to start launching satellites from Burkina Faso. Mm-hmm. And what that means, you really have to understand the technology exchange that is involved in that, the infrastructure development that is involved in that. And they're not launching satellites because they don't feel like launching dishwashers. What are those satellites going to do? That's they're launching the satellites for a reason in that region, for a reason. And AFRICOM might want to be read a few white papers on this and figure this out. Let's if we got the video, let's try the video again. See if we can go to the video again. Roll that wonderful bean footage, as we used to say in those Boston Big Bean commercials. Okay. Duke the dog. Roll that beautiful bean footage. So Dr. Sherman, the first 100 days, what are you what signals are you getting, and whether you're concerned, whether you're afraid, whether you're pleased, what signals are you hearing that people should pay attention to?
If I'm honest, Wilmer, at this point, I think it's almost like a waiting game. I don't know what to take from Trump that was believable, doable. Again, I can't separate the fiction from fact at this point. And so the first 100 days, he's promised to do a lot of things. And he said from this moment forward, but I don't really know what that means. I think it was a lot of double talk. It was just a lot of wrangling, and I don't have any clue. I feel like the journalist in me was almost like I came in and he talked for a long time and I walked out and I still don't know what the bloody hell he was talking about. If you mean literally, what is he about to put pen to paper on? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's a waiting game, and a lot of it is going to be every morning or so we're going to wake up and go, he did what? Where are we? I think it's going to be a lot of that.
Dr. Sherman, I just had a real quick question. Is there an irony here about dismantling the machinery of DEI while at the same time using mechanics of DEI for their own purposes? You've got you've got a level of testing that you're going to start seeing folks need to pass, so that we've got merit-based advancements, the sort of test that a Donald Trump himself could not pass. And so we've got mechanics put in place to have a Pete Hegseth, for example, assume a position that he's not qualified for, or the same of Gabbard and back when, before he withdrew, Matt Gaetz. We're seeing
Ash Patel.
The mechanics of DEI work for that set of people, while the machinery of DEI has been yanked away from ordinary folks who ordinarily would benefit from that. Is there something to that at all? Are you noticing that too?
I notice it, but again, I think that it's this man trying to feed certain information into a vacuum that just does not fit. It's like you're sucking in information, but if you're on the ground, you understand that this doesn't work like this. This isn't even the operating system that we're still using. It's like someone saying, I want to play video games today, and you pull out an Atari system. What are you talking about? How are we supposed to make this work? You can bang it, you can manipulate this, but it does not fit what it is that we're doing. It's like saying you're going to have apprenticeships for folks to learn how to do certain things that we don't do anymore. And so he hasn't really realized that at this point. He's going to get caught behind a lot of what he's saying. And again, it's only going to anger the people who are there. How do you train people to do jobs that don't exist anymore? And then you tell them we're going to recreate these jobs. The testing alone, who would the test design for? All right, so this is a VP Franklin, the test are designed for the dogs. It's like, listen, even I taught in the Midwest. The Midwest is base. It's, no disrespect, but it's basic. But it's about the culture of the Midwest. So that's why you're failing these tests. How do you move that into a modern urban space and expect it to work? It simply won't.
And Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, same question to you, and to follow up on Dr. Sherman's point, all of that she just laid out, and you're talking about doing away with the Department of Education. So you've got Elon Musk and who's the other guy?
Vivek Ramaswamy.
No,
Ramaswamy?
Ramaswamy, and there's Peter Thiel. They're all arguing about we need to increase the number of H-1B1 visas, because they say the folks in Silicon Valley can't find enough qualified engineers. What they're really saying is what we've been hearing in the African American community since we've been here: can't find enough. Why aren't there more black people doing this? Oh, because we can't find the qualified black people to do it. Well, what I take away from Ramaswamy and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk is you can't find enough qualified white people to do these jobs. So now you got to bring these engineers in from other places. At the same time, Donald Trump, the guy whose ring they've all gone to kiss, is not about doing away with the Department of Education.
Well, the Department of Education thing has been something that's been on the right wing's agenda for a long time. It doesn't make any sense. You know, and again, this is Donald Trump not being anything special. He's just repeating what, you know, right wing politicians have been saying for 20 years, 30 years. Let's do away with the Department of Education. Let's do away with everything. But, you know, and the H-1B visa thing was interesting. You know, it's the pay scale. They have labor brokers, companies that bring in people from India. They set them up. They put in 10 or 15 applications per person till they get the person in, and the labor broker takes 10, 50, 20% of the salary. Sometimes that person doesn't even do the work. They send it back to their friend in India to do the work. And they hire these people to come in and train American software engineers to do their job, and then they fire the American software. So this is a scam, and everybody knows it's a scam, and they got caught on it, and that caused a rift between the populist and the tech billionaire elements of MAGA. So you know, this is, again, Trump is going to run into these things that don't make sense. I don't agree with everything Dr. Sherman's saying, but basically the idea that he doesn't understand what the problems are and what the present situation is, and how you have to approach the problems you can't tariff everybody. You're going to get killed with tariffs. You know, it's American manufacturers that have to pay those tariffs. Those are you just can't do it. So these are things that are remnants of, you know, Trump is still in the mindset of, we're the greatest country in the world. We're the toughest. We're going to go out there and we're going to tell everybody what to do. And they're all scared of us. And he thinks that's true. And he's going to run into it at every level of society. And, you know, so we're going to have to see how that works out. What does he do when he runs into these problems?
I got to stop you. And because we got about 8 minutes left, 4 minutes for each of you, Dr. Tawhid and John, same question, whether you're frightened, whether you're encouraged, what do you hear? What signals are you picking up?
Unfortunately, Trump does have great control over one aspect of government. He is the commander-in-chief of the military. And so in all of the things that he has proposed to engage the military in, except possibly civilian policing, he will be able to accomplish just with an order. And so he can put the military at the border. He can, and that not only includes the Mexican border, but also apparently the Canadian border as well. He can do that. And if you put folks in or at the Canadian border, then in many cases you're putting them on the border of Detroit, Michigan. And so Homeland Security, you know, is not a border entity. It also involves itself in things that are going on in cities as well. Those things he can do with just an order. But the economic and social things that he's proposing, either he cannot do, or if he abolishes the Department of Education, will lead to further decline. And that is an imbalance, I think, that is very dangerous. That nothing that he's going to do, promise to do, that's going to increase the welfare of the citizens is actually going to be able to succeed. But he has control of the military and therefore can be repressive if the citizens decide that they don't like the outcomes that are occurring. And so that imbalance to me seems to be part of the process that occurred in Nazi Germany, where of course the chancellor, Hitler as chancellor, had control of the military, but could not deal with the economic problems that were in fact the result of World War II and the aftermath of World War II, which led to further dissatisfaction of the citizens and led to the rising up against the persons in their country, the Jews, that were blamed for the problem. So that's a real concern I have.
There's, as we go to John, there's one other thing I think that area that the president has direct control of, and that is the bully pulpit, the narrative. He can set a tone through his messaging. John Kennedy did it when he said we're going to the moon. Lyndon Johnson did it when he said, "We shall overcome," and he laid the predicate for, we're going to get this jobs bill, we're going to get the civil rights legislation. The bully pulpit is something that I think current presidents have really failed to either understand the power of, or at least decide to use it to their benefit. John Jeter.
Yeah, I think to that point, though, what's interesting to me, what makes me hopeful to some extent, is that these immigrants, many of them coming over from, they've grown up in the land struggles in Oaxaca and Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and that they're coming over, and that they are maybe more radical than their parents were who came over pre-NAFTA, right? And so you see signs, and I don't know if we can predict that this is going to happen, but you see signs that they might congeal with the indigenous Black population, right? We see this in the Amazon worker strike on Long Island, Staten Island rather. We see the Las Vegas Culinary Union, which is very deliberately Black and Latino. A couple of years ago, when they had that flap with the LA City Council members who were speaking in very racist terms and disparaging Blacks, and all of them had to quit except for one council member. And Black Lives Matter went to protest in front of his house, right? He lives in a Latino community. The Latinos came out and had a counter protest. And then they asked the Black Lives Matter, why are you protesting our guy? And they told them. They switched sides. I just think that's a harbinger of things to come, maybe. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Latinos, I think, and everyone else is very much in play. And America is built on the hatred of Black people, right? It just is. People come here and they turn them against Black people because we're the most progressive and radical political actors. So, but I have a sense that there's something that might come down the pike that people like Trump, people like Kamala Harris did not expect, which is brown people who consider themselves allies with Black people, and that could change the whole political calculation.
We had a whole conversation and we didn't even get to Snoop Dogg.
Thank God.
I want to thank everyone for being here and joining us.
We got about a minute. So give me 40 seconds on that one.
Yeah.
Because I think the conversation, it's funny, but it's Snoop, it's Nelly, and of course we had who was it there with
Mike Tyson was in there. Mike Tyson was there today.
So it's this idea of Kanye is who I was thinking of. It's the idea of using athletes and using rappers to convey a message, why in the hell am I going to listen to Snoop? Unless I'm trying to figure out what kind of weed to buy. Why am I? He sells liquor and doesn't even drink. So he sells wine and doesn't drink. So what I think is really the takeaway from that is it's not about Snoop and it's not about Nelly, because they're all about getting paid. It's why are they being used? What is it that he's the king of the buzz? How did was he a Crip or a Blood? I can't remember which color he wore, but now we got former gangsters trying to impact my politics, and they don't know nothing about nothing.
You know what I think though, which this is me stretching and giving Donald Trump and his camp much more credit than they ever possibly should deserve. But there is a fine congruence here between Snoop Dogg and Donald Trump part two here. Is it possible that Snoop Dogg, who has done one heck of an incredible job rehabilitating his image, is somehow emblematic of what Donald Trump hopes to do in this second term? If there's a hopeful note to end on, is it possible that symbolically you take a Snoop Dogg who has not been the statesman before that we've become accustomed. Before he was Martha Stewart, he was Long Beach. And so we're looking for a hopeful note. Is that the one?
No, because
Very simple. Yeah.
because this is not Dick Gregory and Sammy Davis Jr. and that entire cadre of white Hollywood stars that put their money and put their name behind the civil rights movement and the March on Washington. This is just, to me, sheer naked capitalism. That's all this is.
Okay, very fine. On that note,
oh, did I say no to your question? Because I meant to say no.
On that note, we're going to thank all of you for being here. Of course, you just heard from Dr. Wilmer Leon, who's part of the politicsandcolor.com team here. Also joined today by Dr. Chantella Sherman, Jim Kavanaugh, Dr. Linwood Tawhid, and John Jeter. Thank you all for joining us tonight on this momentous moment where the 45th President of the United States became the 47th President of the United States on Inauguration Day this January 20th, 2025. Keep it tuned to politicsandcolor.com. And, you know, we had some videos that we were planning to show you. Unfortunately, we couldn't show you tonight, but if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find those there. And so those will be there waiting for you. Again, thank you very much for joining the conversation. I'm Jonathan.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was
Thank you.
fun.
Thank you.